All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly incredible, the massive 300-year saga of the Mughal Empire. But look, we're not just going to talk about their incredible wealth or their stunning architecture today. We are decoding this superpower entirely through the lens of its defining battles. You know, when you look at the sheer scale of the Mughal Empire, it's pretty easy to forget that this was a dynasty forged, sustained, and ultimately destroyed by relentless, grinding warfare. So let's break down exactly how this superpower was built and how it unraveled, battle by battle.
So, here is our game plan for today. We'll start with forging the empire, move into the massive era of expansion, hit their peak power and the endless wars that came with it, before looking at the great unraveling, and finally, the ultimate collapse.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, forging the Mughal Empire.
We kick things off in the early 16th century with Babur. This guy was a Central Asian ruler with a seriously heavy-hitting pedigree, descended from both Timur and Genghis Khan. After losing his ancestral lands, he just sets his sights southward, pushing straight through the Khyber Pass and right into India. And honestly, this wasn't some slow, creeping conquest. In 1526, he ousted Ibrahim Lodi of the Delhi Sultanate at the First Battle of Panipat. Then, bam! Over the very next 3 years, he just steamrolls the opposition, winning at Kanwa, taking Malwa after the Battle of Chanderi, and grabbing Bihar at the Battle of Gagra. In literally just 4 years, this rapid-fire string of dominant Mughal victories completely redrew the map of the Indian subcontinent.
Now you might be thinking, okay, a few quick military wins, what's the big deal? Well, these weren't just your standard battlefield victories. By taking down the highly capable Rana Sanga and his Rajput confederacy in a massive clash near Agra in 1527, Babur didn't just win a fight. That specific victory at Kanwa literally locked in the fate of northern India for the next 200 years. It was an absolute game changer.
But, and this is a really big but, the early empire was actually incredibly fragile. Babur's successor Humayun ended up suffering these catastrophic defeats at Chausa and Kannauj at the hands of the Sur Empire. It got so bad that he was forced completely out of India, taking refuge in Safavid Persia. For a while there, the Mughal Empire was basically dead in the water. But then, fast forward 15 years to 1555, Humayun pulls off this totally triumphant return, scoring massive, empire-saving victories at Machiwara and Sirhind, bringing the dynasty right back from the brink.
Which brings us nicely into part 2, the era of expansion.
With the empire's survival finally locked down, Humayun's successor, Akbar, steps up and essentially turns the Mughal military into an unstoppable juggernaut. Starting by securing his throne at the Second Battle of Panipat in 1556, Akbar systematically dismantles opposition across the whole subcontinent. I mean, we're talking about besieging massive Rajput forts like Chittorgarh and Ranthambore, and successfully swallowing up incredibly wealthy, vital regions like Gujarat, Bengal, and Kashmir. This wasn't just temporary raiding. This was the permanent structural integration of massive territories into the Mughal machine.
Now, having said that, total control is often a bit of an illusion, right? Despite all these overwhelming annexations happening simultaneously, the Mughals were still running into some fierce, unyielding resistance. Maharana Pratap's Rajput forces in Mewar actually pushed back hard, recapturing massive swaths of territory from Mughal forces in the 1580s. And then in 1586, Yusufzai Afghan tribes literally wiped out an entire Mughal force at the Malandari Pass. It's a pretty stark reminder that even when expansion is at its peak, absolute dominance is really hard to hold on to.
Following Akbar, you get this era of immense wealth under Jahangir and Shah Jahan. But conflict was never entirely off the table. In 1658, things took a brutal turn. The empire was violently seized from the inside during a bloody war of succession. We're talking about Aurangzeb ruthlessly battling his own family for the throne. He defeats his brother Dara Shikoh, overthrows his own father, Emperor Shah Jahan, at Samagar, and crushes another brother at Kajwa. It was this totally uncompromising, violent takeover that crowned Aurangzeb as the new emperor.
And that violent ascension kicks off part 3, peak power and endless war.
So we hit the zenith of the empire under Aurangzeb. This is a period strictly defined by absolute maximum territorial reach. But, and this is crucial, it's equally defined by just endless, grinding wars of attrition. He spent decades locked in relentless conflict. Just look at the sheer numbers here. Fighting an overwhelming 26 battles against the Maratha kingdom alone, 9 against the Sikh Khalsa, and 4 against the Ahom kingdom out east. He was basically fighting on every conceivable front, year in, year out, for decades.
I really want to emphasize why this specific point matters so much.
pushing the map to its absolute limits? Sure, it looked fantastic on paper. Under Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire was literally larger than it had ever been. But the reality on the ground was that the financial, administrative, and military drain of fighting everywhere, all at once, completely hollowed out the empire's actual strength. It's like he built this massive, sprawling mansion, but burned the foundation for firewood to do it.
And you really start to see the cracks in his later reign. The data story shifts dramatically away from the golden days of Babur and Akbar. That previously unbroken wall of Mughal victories starts shattering into localized defeats that just bleed the empire dry. The Ahoms win at Saragat in 1671, the Marathas sack Burhanpur in 1681, the Sikhs and their allies score victories at Nadan in 1691, and Muxar in 1705. Suddenly, this unstoppable juggernaut is looking very, very vulnerable.
Which leads us right into our fourth act, the Great Unraveling.
That vulnerability, it became a fatal reality the absolute second Aurangzeb died. Immediately after 1707, under emperors like Bahadur Shah I, the momentum just completely shifts. The empire doesn't just stall out, it actively starts retreating. Regional powers that the Mughals used to easily suppress are now defeating them out in open combat. A unified Rajput rebellion secures a huge victory in 1708, and the newly militarized Khalsa start racking up decisive back-to-back wins against Mughal forces at places like Sonipat and Sadora. The empire is just bleeding territory and authority at the exact same time.
But then comes the true, utterly humiliating death blow. During Muhammad Shah's reign, the empire goes up against the Afshara dynasty of Iran, resulting in the Battle of Karnal in 1739. The Mughal army is absolutely crushed, which leads to the unthinkable: the total sacking, plundering, and looting of the capital city, Delhi. Literally centuries of accumulated wealth just carried away. For a lot of historians, this is absolutely the point of no return for the Mughal dynasty.
At this point, the empire, once the undisputed, terrifying master of the subcontinent, has effectively become a punching bag for foreign invaders. First, the Persians take the vital Khyber Pass. Then, the Durrani Empire sweeps in, capturing Lahore in 1748 and subjecting Delhi to yet another horrific sack in 1757. Just like that, the Mughals lose all their massive western territories, including Kashmir and Multan, to the Durranis.
And that tragic decline brings us to part 5, the final collapse.
So they're plundered from the outside, completely fractured from within, and then a brand new existential threat enters the chat. As the Mughal grip totally fails, a foreign corporate power, the British East India Company, steps right into that massive power vacuum. They kick off the Bengal War in 1756, and they slowly but surely swallow up Mughal territory through these pivotal, definitive wins. The Battle of Buxar in 1764 basically hands the wealthiest province, Bengal, right over to the British, and by 1804, the British are actually winning the siege of Delhi itself.
And that brings us to this stark, solitary number: 1857. This specific year serves as the absolute final tombstone for an empire that it ruled, fought, and expanded for over 3 centuries.
In 1857, the last desperate gasp of the Mughal Empire is systematically snuffed out through a brutal series of absolute British victories. Whether it was at Badli Ki Sarai, Najafgarh, Agra, or finally, the ultimate siege of Delhi, the Mughal forces were decisively beaten down. And this string of defeats didn't just mean a loss of land. It meant the formal, total abolition of the Mughal dynasty once and for all.
We've just covered 300 years of relentless conquest, massive overextension, and ultimate collapse. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. How does an empire born with such lightning speed, equipped with such staggering military power, choose to spread itself so dangerously thin across countless battlefields that it ultimately orchestrates its own unavoidable demise? It's a huge question. Thank you for exploring this with me today, and as always, keep asking those big questions.